Oh, I stole.
But I just
So Andrea's gonna be the mic? Yeah. Okay.
It was like,
This is Andrea's book. Now she's gonna read it from memory to us.
oh yeah.
Prologue.
Yeah, before you talk about your book. We're just saying we're
I can get a mic over here.
First, these guys are gonna play a song for us. They've been working
The song we loved for the yesterday.
Yeah.
and then Andrea's gonna talk to us for a while.
So,
It's on.
okay, so I'm
Why is my bag like a pit of nothingness? But also too much stuff.
you, Lindy? Okay.
Are we going live?
Yeah, we are. So, the name of the song is called Fields of Glorious. Isn't that cool? Glorious. They're an actual flower. She thought it was glorious, like glorious, so it's a cool double meaning. But anyway, it starts off where the guy is sad because he lost the love of his life, and he keeps going to this tree, right? The willow tree. And he keeps going to the tree, but he's like really depressed. And one day he just decides to let that go and just smile. And so the second verse, the woman that he loved finally visits him, like in his spirit, and says, hello, like she answers basically what he's been looking for all these days he's been going there. And then at the end, they kind of end up both passing away. So we kind of took The Dance, which is a song by the duo, Us the Duo, which is beautiful. One Last Dance, it's like a story timeline, kind of like these people in love.
It's a tearjerker.
You probably will hear it tomorrow during lunch. We'll play it. But anyway, we're gonna try it, and yeah, it's by these lovely ladies. Wasn't there? Did Sophie help with this?
Yeah, she had a little bit.
Okay, so we don't need a mic.
We'll be live.
Okay.
Oh no, you can do it.
You can do it, Emily.
Okay.
You can do it.
Let her go around again. Hello, it's me. Don't you remember us? Used to run in the fields of glorious. Sit under a weeping and then we'll be singing, so we'll work on the vocals and all that.
Sorry you have to follow that.
Pretty, it's really pretty. Good job. All right, keep that. Retype it. Sweet.
That was awesome. So how many songs have been written so far? 1, 2, 3.
You always like to write on the board, you said.
Oh, all right, on the board.
Let's write down all the songs we've created
All right, well,
on day 3.
the funk, what's it called?
Futuristic fun.
Futuristic funk.
Oh, before you go. Okay, what's our first song?
That was number 1.
Puppy love.
2, puppy love.
It's not puppy love.
Yeah.
Wait over
It's
there.
not puppy love. Okay, 3.
Get it right.
We've got Fields of Glorious.
Yeah.
I love that title, guys. Okay, number 4,
A record store, Bob?
Record store.
record store or record store.
Are you gonna do record store? Yeah, you should do record store.
So,
5.
no, she said record store.
Record store.
So,
Immortal.
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 Yeah.
I got a feeling.
And they're all cool titles too. Immortal,
Yeah.
and that's it, right? In 2 days?
That's incredible. I'm scared.
Huh? They're good then.
Yeah. And they're all different too.
And they're all totally different. One is like alien futuristic, one is very pop R&B, the other one's very folk. Record Store is kind of like a beat old throwback Ricky Lee Jones.
Yeah, it's
kinda
like
Joni
Beatles,
Mitchell. Kind of like what, like a slide kind of thing?
No, that's like, that's like indie rock.
Yeah.
Dun, 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 dun,
See,
dun,
we
dun.
got it covered.
Yeah.
Swensson, and she is a wonderful person, and she's come here every year so far, and she's a music historian and author and a DJ, used to DJ a lot, and a mother.
That's true.
Oh,
Oh,
wonderful.
Good job.
Look her
Yeah,
up.
one time I came, I was
Yeah.
And wife and what else? Podcaster, yeah, she does Prince podcasts, and a new one's coming out about Welcome to America. And we all know Welcome to America is the album that's coming out this week from 11 years ago. And she's gonna talk about that and some other stuff.
Yeah. The first episode features Lisa, which is fun. Well, Heidi gave me this book, so I'll hold it up. This is my book. I've talked to some of you already about it in past years, so I won't go to it in detail, but just to give you a little bit of background on me, I wrote this book and published it in 2017. It is heavily focused on the Minneapolis-St. Paul music scene in the 60s and 70s mostly. And it's all about the R&B and funk and soul artists who influenced Prince and Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis and Morris Day and all of the big names that we know and associate with the Minneapolis sound. They were all really shaped and inspired by this older generation of artists, including Prince's own father, John Nelson, who was a jazz pianist. And you met?
I met him, I had lunch with him, I had soup with him.
Oh.
And we were eating soup and making all that soup noise, right? And it was so quiet because nobody was talking, and I was like trying to make conversation with his dad just because I'm Italian and I talk at the table and I'm like, pass the cheese. And his dad, I said to his dad, I'm like, you smell really good, what's that cologne you're wearing? And he goes, you like it? I got it at Target for $10. And Prince's face went from to, oh, and just like, please don't keep talking to my dad. It was the funniest thing. So yeah, I got to meet his dad.
Oh, that's great. That's awesome.
It was great. He's human.
Yes. Some of the names I see are listed on the board there of some of the artists that I talked about in the book. Active in the 60s and 70s, the Amazers, the Exciters, both fantastic R&B bands. Maurice McKinney's was like a standout star in the late 60s. The Big M's were the first R&B band to make a record in Minnesota back in 1958, the year Prince was born, which I found very cool. And Sunny Night was still performing up until very recently. He sadly passed career, in addition to Wee Willie Walker, who I wrote about a lot in the book, like decades-long careers in music. So I'm continuing to do research into that area. I'm currently working on a project about Cornbread Harris, which I'm really excited about. Jimmy Jam's father. He's 94 years old and he's been making music. He co-wrote the first rock single to ever come out of Minnesota in 1955, and he's been playing ever since. He had 4 gigs this last week at age 94, including playing the Aquatennial and playing a brunch gig at Ice House and playing Palmer's Bar. So a very active, which I think is part of what has kept him going all these years. He's so motivated to continue entertaining people, which is just wonderful. So I'm spending every Monday with him at the moment. We're working on a book about his life. And then I'm working on this podcast. To talk about Welcome to America because it's the release week for this record. I don't know how much you know about it already, but I can kind of go over some of the basics. Prince recorded this album in 2010. He announced a tour of the same name, but the album never came out. So it went into his vault, and this was albums all together. He wouldn't put out another album until 2014 when he released 2 on the same day. So it was an interesting period in his career where he was still writing and recording music, but just not releasing it at all. And this complete album was waiting in his vault and was found and is coming out Friday, which is pretty amazing. I don't know how much advance notice you got that this was in the works, but
None.
I think it surprised a lot of people.
Yeah, I didn't even remember the songs because we hadn't heard them since when he recorded them.
Mm-hmm.
So listening back to it, it was like, oh my God, I do remember that song. And there were 10 of them. How many songs are on it? 11?
There's 12
songs?
Yeah.
Wow. And we didn't sing on one of them because he wouldn't let us.
Oh yeah. There's a very, very sexy song. Yeah.
And the ladies weren't allowed.
So a couple of the songs have been released in different forms. Hot Summer was released on The Current, where I used to work up until a couple months ago. And I remember when that was debuted, it was this huge deal. It was on his birthday that year in 2010. And it was the only station where you could hear it in the country, which I think speaks to Prince's, real love of his hometown and wanting to support people in Minneapolis. And then that was it. He never released it officially or anything. And then a couple of the songs snippets of them were shared on his final studio album, Hit and Run Phase 2. But one was tacked onto the second half. It was almost like a hidden track. So this is the first time that all of these songs are on a record that you can buy at the record store on vinyl and all that good stuff. So something that I wanted to talk about with this record is Prince's legacy in his songwriting. I was thinking, because you're all writing songs, there's so many ways to approach communicating your own thoughts about the world and things that you see going on in the world. And sometimes Prince would be more general about it or use a lot of metaphor or speak, in poetry about his thoughts. And sometimes some of the more direct songs, because I think it kind of puts into context the new album, because this is when he's really going in on his thoughts on America. So what do you think the song Sexuality is about? The song came out back in 1981, a controversy. What would you say a song with that title would be about? Right.
Some people men, girls.
Yeah, so it's kind of about that, and then it's also kind of one of Prince's first direct assessments of what it means to be politically active. This is my reading of the lyrics, but I want to play it for you and then you see what you think. everybody, yeah, this is your life. I'm talking about a revolution, we gotta organize. We don't need no segregation, we don't need no race. New age revelation, I think we got a case. I had heard this song so many times, and then I heard it recently, and it just hit me in this whole different way of what he was actually talking about in this song, now that I've done so much research into his early life. And I think that's so true of so much of his material. It has these double and sometimes triple meanings, where it seems like it's a song about love or a girlfriend or sex, but it's also about politics and God and these really deep topics that were so important to him. Prince was raised in Minneapolis, as you all know, in North Minneapolis, during a time when the city was so deeply segregated and growing more segregated all the time. It still is to this day. But you know, coming up in North Minneapolis, it was initially a predominantly Jewish neighborhood, and then throughout the 50s and 60s, it became more of a Black neighborhood. And it really started to become this separate part of the city, where musicians that were coming up there were really struggling to be heard outside of North Minneapolis, and you know, get booked in gigs playing downtown in the cool clubs that were starting to open, and were really sidelined in this significant way. And Prince was very aware of that as he was coming up. So I think about, you know, how important it was that he's already talking about segregation, you know, this early in his career, when people are like, who's that guy in the trench coat and bikini bottoms, you know, and he's really saying something deep about his own city and his experience as a Black man.
And I think too, Andrea, also the radio was segregated at that time. So I think you talk about double entendre as double meanings. I think he was speaking to that as well, where like in the 70s, when we were talking about Aretha Franklin and all of these folks, back then you could like listen to the radio and you could hear white artists, Black artists, Santana, like that's what he grew up, you know, sort of listening to. But in the 80s, again, when I was young and I was like listening to music, it was always like it's a Black station or it's a white station. And so I think it was also speaking about that too. Like we don't need segregation in music either. Like we need to be sort of blending the sounds and the genres. So it just kind of came to me as you were saying.
Yeah, and I was actually in all that in the 90s even, it was there. Because I was trying to promote my record that Prince produced for me. And it was a very R&B record. And I wasn't getting white radio play, so I went to the Black stations and I had a tough time getting it played because I was white. But it was an R&B record, so it kind of went both ways in a way, you know? I know I had trouble.
Well, and that's still being sorted out today with, you know, there's been talk recently about the Grammys, different categories. Well, now we're talking about, should there be gender categories at all? Like, why is that fair for people that don't identify as male or female? And also, why is there still these strict lines around R&B when a lot of times what's actually put in the R&B category might not even be that style of music, but it's more drawn around lines of race. So that's still being kind of sorted out.
I've noticed like the Grammys have kind of been more like xenophobic. Like they don't like have like outside of the US like groups like shoot Grammys or get nominated
Or they get their awards in the afternoon.
yeah, they like perform or anything. I
But
feel
not
like it's
televised.
kind of like I just heard they're kind of like they're not good with
Right.
foreign groups or like foreign artists.
There's a lot of issues. I mean, I think the last
Same
5
with
years.
the radio too.
There's been so many reckonings in so many different industries over this, and I feel like it's still very much being sorted out. But it's interesting to me to think about, you know, Prince being so aware of that from such a young age. He was 19 when he signed his first recording contract, and he looked the record label executive in the eyes and said, "Don't market me as a Black artist. I want to be a pop artist," because he knew that there were these lines and these boxes that he put in, and it wasn't that he didn't want to be identified as a Black man, and he was proud of his, you know, Blackness, but he knew that the industry was set up to try to put you into this corner. So he was really, really proactive about that from an early age, which is like, think about what a risk that is. Someone's giving you this huge opportunity and you're like, I'm only gonna do it on my terms. I'm sure you all know this song, but after, you know, the huge success of Purple Rain, Prince got very experimental with his songwriting and was envisioning all of these kind of alternate realities with songs like Paisley Park, and then he came out in 1987 with Sign of the Times, and again, he's just going directly in on what he says, you know, the state of the world at that point. Okay, wait, so I have to tell you a story first. So I interviewed, who was at this moment in time, Prince's fiance, Suzanne and Melvoin, last year for the podcast that we made around Sign of the Times. And she told me this crazy story that I'd never heard before, and I have to tell it to you before you hear this first. So she said that she was in LA with Prince the week that he wrote and recorded this song. And they experienced an earthquake together at this hotel where they were staying. And Prince hated it, hated the experience of being in an earthquake, and immediately booked a flight out of town and was like, forget it, you know, I'm not going into the studio, I'm going home to Minneapolis. On the plane, she believes, he wrote this song, and then eventually the next day turned around and returned to Sunset Sound in LA to record it. But that morning, typical.
He's like, I'm outta here.
Wait a minute, I'm coming back. But that morning before they left the hotel, the paper was on the table, and I actually looked up the LA Times headlines on this date in history, and there was an article about a conference in Paris about AIDS. There was a headline about Star Wars, the missile crisis, and there back home was articles almost every day at this point about a gang called the Disciples that was on trial for murdering a woman. So I just wanted to tell you that.
France, a skinny man died of a big disease with a little name. By chance his girlfriend came across a needle and soon she did the same. At home there were 17-year-old boys and their idea of fun is meeting a gang called the Disciples, high on crack, toting a machine gun. Church and kill everyone inside it. You turn on the telly and every other story is telling somebody died. Sister killed her baby cause she couldn't afford to feed it. We're sending people to the moon. In September my cousin tried reefer for the very first time. Now it's doing horse. It's June.
The whole billionaires going into space thing.
Yeah, safe space.
Right.
Yeah. In the production, you felt all that space.
Oh,
and how
yeah.
The funkiness comes from the quiet parts. That the feel.
It's
Oh,
so stark.
that one for sure. Like it's every time.
Anybody know what force means in the song?
Yeah. What does force mean?
Heroin.
Heroin.
Yeah.
Okay. Don't fill in every space.
It's a street name.
Here's
Yeah.
instructions. Get you suggestions next time.
Okay, so that's 87, so we're still, you know, pretty early on in Prince's career. So I wanted to play you a live at Paisley Park in I think they started, and they're like, if you want, come to Paisley Park right now. And they had Yahoo was live streaming it, and it was just this very like impromptu, like, here we go. So Prince only played 3 songs that night. The second song, I think, in this little set was this vault track that was released on Crystal Ball called What's My Name? And it was so surreal. I had so many nights like this out at Paisley Park covering him, but all of a sudden Prince starts doing this song and Kendrick Lamar walked out on stage and started rapping over it. And I was like, what? It was amazing. What was happening? It was like me and like 15 other people around going like, what is going on? But this song, I hadn't really ever paid paid a lot of attention to this song, but his choice to pull it out in that moment and get Kendrick to rap on it was so poignant. And I just think the lyrics say a lot. So it's called What's My Name? And it's also a very kind of sparse, brooding song. I think I really like this one.
Nothing stays the same anyway. I can take my fame, I can't use it. My girlfriend calls me late, game was over yesterday. Tell me
Yeah. What's the song called?
this place. I can't play. It all makes me wish.
Sure, a song like this, quiet, you get like, it's like, with just
And
like a
guess-
really little rolling butt bass.
You gotta give a big range. You go like super high.
This reminds me of new metal.
Yeah.
Then it gets loud.
We're gonna play the one with Kendrick tomorrow, the video.
Just the rap of the loud part.
It's so good. I'm looking this up. It's going on my playlist. Definitely.
It's on Spotify, just so you know.
Yes.
All of these are. Except for this next one I'm gonna play, which is on YouTube.
Yeah, Andrea, that day, we knew the albums were coming out, and so my friend Sarah and I just went out there.
Right.
And then in the meantime, they finally said, yeah, come out, so it was.
With all the different sounds and everything.
Yeah. It's one of
No,
those
just the name.
things.
What's my name?
What's my name?
And I know
Oh.
that Jim Walsh was here yesterday talking about the 90s, so that's so rooted in him, divorcing himself from his own birth name and going through the transition into the symbol and everything. But it just feels so raw. I love the line too where he says that you never would have drank my coffee if I hadn't given you cream. You don't know if he's talking about the single cream or like, trying to make his music more appealing to white audiences. There's like so many layers you can take with that.
In the song Cream,
That's what she said.
yes. And cream means money. Cash moves everything around.
Right, there's that too.
See, triple entendre.
Yep. So since I was just talking about Third Eye Girl, I wanted to play you something that was recorded live at Paisley Park with Third Eye Girl. And this was a party that Prince threw in, feels weird to call it a party, it was a dance rally for peace. And it happened immediately following the death of Freddie Gray in the hands of police in Baltimore. And this was the second or third police killing that year, and it was such a moment of the Black Lives Matter movement really crystallizing. So Prince wanted to have a rally at Paisley Park, and then he also did one in Baltimore to really just have a healing space for people as this really traumatic stuff was going on. And he played the song Dreamer at Paisley Park that night. And it's 16 minutes long, so I won't play you the whole thing, but the whole thing is incredible. It's mostly Prince just soloing on guitar, and then he moves to piano, and then he moves back to the guitar, and you can hear him grieving in the music. It's so powerful. But at the end of the song, he starts to kind of improvise some of the lyrics from Dreamer and make it more specifically about his upbringing in North Minneapolis and his experience as a Black man dealing with the police. So I wanted to share this with you, just because I think it's so profound.
next served on a bed of lies. Don't go down too easy when you see your daddy crying. Have you ever clutched the steering wheel of your car too tight? See him but I didn't. I used to live on Plymouth. Russell and Penn. Clutching the steering wheel too tight while the helicopter circles. What's up in the sky? It's like chemicals taking flight. Better keep one eye open, like CBS. So I can see your BS.
I love that. Yeah, so like I said, find this on YouTube, it's great, the whole thing is great.
That quote is actually, like, I can say the quote about, we're not afraid of the police in Chanhassen. It's a reference to Chris James, the engineer, and myself, because we both got pulled over right out front of Paisley Park at different times. And the police harassed us outside of Paisley Park. And Prince came out. I know for me, the time that I got pulled over, I was coming to pick up Cassie and Chris and Gooch from doing a late night session with Prince. And when they pulled me over, there was another car in front of me that was swerving. And the girl who was driving was obviously plastered. And they let her go. So they could run my tags and do all the stuff. And while they had me, they tried to detain me. And while they had me there, they asked me a bunch of questions. They ran my license, ran my tag. They wanted to see if the car was stolen. Everything. And while they had me there, they just asked me over and over again the same questions. Why are you here? What are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. Because in Chanhassen, there's not a lot of black people. So I kept telling them, I work here. And they said, who do you work for? I said, the guy who pays your salary. And they said, who is that? And I looked, I could see Paisley Park right across the street. And I just saw the afro, like the silhouette of the afro. He was just standing outside like this. Like this. And I said, him. And he goes, they both turned to two cops. And they turn and look and he goes, and they said, do you know who that is? I said, do you know who that is? So immediately, once he waved and gave like the signal that he's with me, their whole attitude changed. It was like, we're so sorry, we're, blah, blah, blah. You understand? And I was like, no, I don't. I don't understand at all. So it's funny, I had never heard that before, but I know for a fact that we talked about it. And he said that to us, to me and Chris. He was like, you don't have to be afraid of the police in Chanhassen.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, cool.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow, that's an incredible story. We have to think about that the rest of the day.
Yeah. Right.
Wow. Yeah, this whole period for him, you could tell that this was starting to become like a front and center concern, I know he was contributing to the Black Lives Matter movement financially, and then he did write the song Baltimore to specifically address this. I don't remember if he played it this night at Paisley, but I remember it came out around the same period. Have you guys all heard that song? Okay.
Yes.
Wow. So I've been thinking about this whole thread through Prince's songwriting a lot because I, for whatever reason, read a lot of comments online about Prince. I can't help myself. And there seems to be this kind of funny divide in the Prince community between people who are like open and receptive to Prince's messages about social justice and racial justice. And then there's this other kind of section of the Prince fandom that's like, Prince didn't see color and he made music for everybody, and why are you trying to make it political? And I just don't think as a researcher it would be responsible for me to erase this whole lineage in his work of political songwriting. So that's kind of why I wanted to like prime you with all of this. And now I'm gonna play the title track to the new record, and I think you'll see how it kind of fits No, Welcome to America. Yeah, Hot Summer, not as political. Although you could, well, I won't get into it right now. So here's Welcome to America. And again, it's brooding, it's sparse, and it's almost a spoken word delivery, kind of like Sign of the Times and kind of like What's My Name, which I think is really interesting.
Listen for her.
Welcome to America, where you can fail at your job, get fired, rehire, and get a $700 billion tip.
Come on in, sit right down, and fill up your pockets, yeah.
Mass media, information overload. Welcome to America. Distracted by the features of the iPhone. In other words, taken by a pretty face.
Somebody's watching you.
Welcome to America. Hook up later at the iPad. Or we can meet at my place. Welcome to America. Where everything and nothing that Google says is here. We will not raise your taxes. Read our lips.
Welcome to America. Welcome to the big show. Everybody's looking for something when there ain't no place to go.
Welcome to America.
Except inside America. That's the only place I know. Transformation happens deep within. Yes or no? Yes.
Welcome to America. One of the greatest exports was a thing called jazz. Thing that plays music alive. Welcome to America.
Hope and change.
Everything takes forever. Truth is a new minority. Oh, welcome to America.
2010. Isn't that nuts? I'm telling you,
And
the
it's
man
crazy,
was,
because we talk about what's happening today.
he's so ahead of his time, and he just thought ahead.
That's why he phoned me.
He's calling. See, you know we're talking about him.
All right, that's enough, yeah. Wow, yeah, so, that's the opening track of the record, and then you get
Yeah.
11 more songs after that. So Hot Summer's been released. That comes about midway through the record, and I really kind of see it as like a palate cleanser almost, because some of the opening tracks are just so intense, that you kind of want that fun drive around the beach in the summer song. There's a really beautiful cover of a Soul Asylum song that prominently features Elisa and Prince's voices weaving together in this amazing way. I got chills the first time I heard it. And there's other songs that address the political situation. So this was all written in 2009, 2010, right after Barack Obama started his first term. So, I mean, think about the risk he's taking in a song like that, saying hope and change, question mark, you know, as a, you know, everyone had this real hope around the first black president and what that was gonna do for the country, and Prince was still saying, well, I wanna see what you're gonna do for the black community, and I'm not gonna let you off the hook. And he was, at this moment, scheduling meetings with Obama. They actually didn't get to meet at this time when this record was being worked on, but that was when the conversation between the two of them started. And he wanted to sit down with Obama and go over his concerns, specifically around education and poverty and issues that were affecting specifically Black Americans, which was such a brave and bold thing to do, you know, as an artist, to take that kind of political stance. So it's such an interesting record to think about, and it feels so timely now, because it feels like he was almost predicting the way things were gonna go. You know, lines like "truth is the new minority," and you think about just the massive amounts of disinformation that are now online, and how so much of what we consume is controlled by a few different companies, Google and Facebook and all these monopolies, like you guys sing about in the song. So really powerful stuff. So I wanted to play you just a little bit of one of the other singles that has been released. It's called "Born to Die," and it was written in a direct response to a video that Prince came across on YouTube. He was a very heavy YouTuber.
Yes.
And he was watching all these videos of his friend Cornel West. You guys know who Cornel West is? He's an academic. He just recently resigned from Harvard. Now he's going to be teaching in New York. Very respected academic and activist and philosopher, and very, very intelligent person, close friend of Prince's. They had many deep conversations at this time, but Prince came across this video of Cornel kind of making an aside comment and saying, yeah, you know, I love my brother Prince, but he's no Curtis Mayfield. And Prince said, oh, really? And this is a story he told verbatim to Morris Hayes, who co-produced the album. So Morris has been telling this story, and then for the podcast, Morris and I got to get on Zoom with Cornel, and Morris told the story directly to Cornel West. And that was just a delightful exchange to witness. Cornel was holding his chest and going, I love it, I love it, I love it. It was just really, really cute. But so this is basically an homage to Curtis Mayfield and inspired by Cornel West. Yeah, I got her name up
She's a bad Born to die, born to die. Born to die, born to die. Ooh, born to die, born to die. She sells everything, A to Z, anything just to keep up free from the hustle of the streets. Oh, but she left the church a long time ago. Said they couldn't teach what they did not know. That's when she lost her she's dripping every bottle. From New York to LA. Ask her why she do that thing. She says it's always been that way.
I wanted to play you a Curtis Mayfield song that I think could be directly associated with this, maybe on Prince's mind. You know about Superfly?
Darkest of night, the moon shining bright. There's a circle spring, a lot of things going on. The man of the hour has an air of great power. The dudes have envied him for so long. Oh, Superfly. You're gonna make your fortune mind. But if you lose, then there's no
So in talking to Cornel West, he is so amazing at weaving together this like really powerful lineage of artists. America, he probably thesis paper as he was speaking. It was just so incredible. But I wanted to play just a few little snippets of some other music that he really feels like closely relates to Prince's work on Welcome to America, because what Prince was doing with his songwriting at this time is he's, as you heard in the title track, you know, directly addressing his concerns in this really explicit way, like he did on Sign of the Times. But then he's also adding these other songs that feel a little bit lighter and more hopeful. And he's imagining these other places and other worlds and what our world could be like if things were different. There's a song called 1000. What Cornel West was saying is that this is part of a lineage of artists expressing these freedom dreams, which is imagining a higher place, a better place, and it's something that empowers you and keeps you going as you fight for change in the world that you're living in now. So I found a couple examples of that that I just love. This was on actually a playlist that Prince gave to the New Girl producers when he was gonna appear on that show as like some jams he wanted playing while he was hanging out on set. So Staple Singers, City in the Sky. All about getting up on this new level, which I really like. Right now, so I just wanted to play you some examples of, you know, I know it's a scary thing to really be like blatant and explicit about how you view the world and like tackle big issues, and it can feel like, is that gonna make a good song? Is that too much? Is it too serious? I hope these are some examples I can show you, you know, whether you wanna address it head on or you wanna use metaphors or, you know, create a more poetic way of expressing it. Like, it's totally possible, and it's been part of, you know, a huge part of music history and a huge part of Prince's history, and, yeah, that's kind of what I hope to leave you with. That's that. Do you have any questions for me? I just played you music for a long time.
It was great. Hopefully some of it will make it to YouTube, I don't know, they might.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know.
Oh, yeah,
Let's
that's
get-
right, I forgot about
I hope I
that.
don't get your account banned.
We'll see.
I didn't play anything unreleased intentionally.
Right,
so.
yeah.
Copyrighted, I know.
Yeah, yes, it's all copyrighted.
You're all so silent.
Yeah. Do you have any questions for Andrea?
How'd you get into like researching about this stuff? Like, what inspired you to do that?
Well, so I've been a music journalist for a while. We don't have to go into how long now. But over the years, I've really focused on local music. I worked at the All Weekly City Pages, and then for the last decade, I worked at The Current, and my kind of beat has always been, you know, mostly Minneapolis, St. Paul, but also larger greater Minnesota music. And I don't think you can write about local music without writing about Prince, so I very quickly, you know, started educating myself more about his career, and, you know, I was born the year before Purple Rain came out, so I was not alive and witnessing a lot of this stuff firsthand, but so I've had to, you know, really educate myself, going back through time, what was going on in his career at certain points, and through that process, I started going to see him a lot. He was playing a lot, especially in the last few years of his life, a lot of shows at Paisley Park. I got to see some rehearsal shows that he played at the Dakota Jazz Club downtown. My first Prince show was at the Excel Energy Center. So anytime he was active here, I would always go see it. And then in the later years, he just became so active here in Minneapolis that I was going out. I mean, my husband literally got sick of going to Paisley Park. That's how often we were going there. And I had to start finding other people to go with me because I was just like living there basically, and then writing about everything that he was doing. And through that process, I also got to meet him and have interactions with him. I started getting invited by him to come to the events, and then he would tweet links to the things that I was writing, which is always very surreal for me. But I just kind of became like this, like a beat reporter, and my beat was Prince. And through that, I just really wanted to make sure I understood exactly what I was talking about, because I knew he was reading everything that I wrote. I didn't want to make a fool of myself. So that's kind of what piqued my interest. And then, you know, knowing so much as I do about local music, I started thinking about the parts of his story that aren't as documented, and his early life and early influences. It was really difficult to track down a lot of information about that. And this was before he started working on his memoir, which now we have a few more little details from that, but there just wasn't a lot to go on and to really try to piece together like how, you know, the Twin Cities history had anything to do with him as a kid. So I just started to basically get obsessed with that and spent 4 years of my life obsessed with that and interviewing all these musicians, you know, elders in the Black community that were, you know, active in those early years, and learning more about the political and social history of the Twin Cities. And it just kind of became a part of my Prince research, but also like this other thing that I got really into. So yeah, I don't know, it's like a rabbit hole, and you just kind of fall down, and then you look up one day and you're like, how did this happen? Like, oh my God, that was a lot of my life that I spent doing that.
And she used to host the local show on The Current, which is Sunday nights from 6 to 9, right?
6 to 8, yep.
6 to 8. And this coming Sunday, Serendipity is gonna be on the local show.
Oh.
So you guys should listen to the local show from 6 to 8, or
That's
6
great.
to 7, I guess, because we're going next, we got a show at 7.
You're gonna be on the radio.
Song that we made at the Zoom last year.
Yeah, last
Yeah.
Okay, so a lot of people here, well, we're in high school and we're trying to figure out what we want to do. What made you, what sparked, like, you know, what inspired you to become a journalist?
Jim Walsh.
Oh,
Funny
yeah,
enough.
yesterday?
Yeah.
Wow.
So he was the local music columnist for the Pioneer Press when I was a teenager, and I read his column religiously. It was like every Friday morning I would get up at 6 in the morning as a teenager, like I don't even know how, and read everything that he wrote, and then I would go to the record store that night and buy anything he wrote about, and it just became this like thing in my life. Like he was just present in my life, even though I didn't know him. And then there's a very long, funny story that I won't go all the way into, but my high school boyfriend actually asked me to prom in his column. Which was a very funny moment in my life. And yes.
Otherwise, I would say no there. You put the effort in. You gotta go.
Oh, yeah.
Did you want to go with Jim?
Dream. No, I saw him as this like Lester Bangs figure in my life, you know. So then I got to meet Jim after that. He actually snuck my boyfriend and I in the back door of the turf club, and I got to see Ike Riley. That was my first real like rock show that wasn't at Warped Tour or something.
I think we met at an Ike Riley show.
Yeah, and it just kind of like opened up this whole world to me. I was a musician, I played piano, and thought I was gonna go to college for that, but then it just kind of took my attention away from that, and I really wanted to become a journalist, so that's that.
That's great, I forgot all about that.
Or herstory.
Any other questions?
Any other questions for Andrea? This is a golden moment. How many of you want to go to college? Okay. I would say, as you think about college and that part of your life, if you choose to go that route, and I think there's value in both. I mean, I really do. I went to college, and one of the greatest things that I learned from it and why it was important for me, and why it helps even sort of ground the work that I'm even doing with you all, is that this ability to research, this ability to understand how to look in the past, make those connections, and then create something new from that. That's why this morning I had you going through this, is because I learned that in college. I learned that, you know, in order to be really good at anything, you have to study the greats, and you have to incorporate, and so if you want to go to college, again, get that research background, because whatever it is you want to do, if you want to be a journalist or a musician, the more you're able to have that, you know, that wealth of knowledge to sort of pull from. Again, like I said, imagine these as colors if we were painters, as we're writing our songs. I mean, there are millions of, so college gives you an idea to have a palette so beautiful of artists that you could draw from, or people that you can be inspired from, or writers, you know. So just consider that and think about that. And again, I'm a person that went to college, I advocate for it, but that might not be your thing.
I didn't go.
I didn't finish.
Cause I always,
Yeah,
I always wanted to be a singer, and I knew that, and I just was like, what's school for? Cause I was already, had record deals and all that, but it's rare. If I wouldn't have had this, you know, the opportunities, I probably would have gone to be a music teacher. Now, looking at this week, I might have done that.
Well, I believe you're gonna find your place wherever that is you're supposed to be. You know, so just kind of, again, like we said yesterday, just trust the process. We know we're in a good space right here. We're making something really cool, and it's gonna grow to into something. Just, again, just have faith in that and trust that, I think. That's what we learned. That's what I learned most from Prince, you know. It's just like, I'll make an album and they'll put it out 11 years later and it's still relevant. So like, let's look at our work in that way. Like, we're talking about futurism. And you know, Prince talked about the future a lot. His vision of the future was kind of dark. I noticed that even from like 1999, it's like always like this dark. But we have an opportunity to rewrite the history and to rewrite the future. So why don't we paint the future as something more different? It can be.
We saw the future.
Right.
And the future looked fun.
There it is. We're gonna paint the future from.
We didn't play that for.
Andrea.
Okay. Speaking of which, a perfect transition. Andrea, this was the first song that the kids that we all wrote together. Yeah, that was it was just kind of a transition.
Yeah.
Writing on her?
Be careful, this might blow your mind.
Yeah, it's kind of yeah, it might blow your eardrum. It might blow your mind. I got a little bit of that
saw the future and the world looked funky.
Oh yeah.
Look,
Thank